7 o'clock. I would like to open up our Charter Review Committee meeting, and as normal, I would like to start with our pledge of allegiance to the flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you very much. Okay, looks like we've got some folks in our audience that would like to take advantage of citizens' input, and who might want to speak from the community? Mr. Brill? You had your hand up first.
Oh, yes. Okay. Is there a microphone that I speak into? Or?
Yeah.
This stuff I come
Sure.
over here?
Sure.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay. I actually have a question I'd like to ask Mr. Emmerich, if that's okay. Sure. Okay. According to the town charter, the document on the town's website, under section 4, acting town manager, basically the charter describes the acting town manager in temporary absence dash by letter filed with the town clerk. The town manager, with the approval of the Board of Selectmen, shall designate a qualified town administrative officer or employee to exercise the powers and perform the duties of the town manager during a temporary absence, which is what the law, which is basically what the charter says. So basically, Mr. Emmerich, I have a question. My question is, in order for somebody to be acting town manager in accordance with the charter, I would, just as I read it, it would mean that the town manager would appoint somebody, and then this appointment or whatever it would be filed with the town clerk's office, correct?
According to the language, yeah.
Okay. So my question is basically, if a document was not filed to the town clerk's office for whatever reason, does that mean that the appointment is technically not legal, or because accordance with the charter, it says for it to be official, it would have to be filed with the town clerk. So.
And once again, when you look at the scope of what was the intent, it could be interpreted several different ways. One is there's a statutory authority with delegation of authority. If you look under Mass General Law, there's a process that's spelled out that way. And it's also defined here. Is the intent for a long-term absence, or if it's a vacancy that's created over a long term, absolutely, the process should be. Once again, as you look at it on a short term or an interim basis, by day, once again, it could be functioning under the statutory obligation of that particular appointment for delegation authority.
Oh, okay. And statutorily, you mean what? A letter would not need to be filed? Just
what that means.
Just so I understand in simple terms.
What that means is any public official that can transfer their authority can do so legally in a delegation, as long as it's clearly understood what that delegation and what that authority is.
Oh, okay, okay. Oh, okay. In other words, if it's spelled out beforehand, in other words, or similar to that, or it's basically made known beforehand, in other words.
Yeah. There's also an assumption in most cases that if a person possesses statutory authority under the Mass General Law, that delegation is valid for, again, once you said the scope of what the responsibility is. And it doesn't necessarily carry all the powers with it.
Oh, okay.
But it could be specific. It could be a lot of different ways that that's handled.
Oh, okay. And my second question would be really simple, is whoever is acting town manager, does that person, I guess, what type of authority does that person have? Would that person have authority to sign invoices or negotiate any contracts, or?
That would have to be understood by the person delegating the authority. That would have to be an arrangement made by that individual, or between those two individuals.
Oh, okay, whether that authority was there or shouldn't be, or should be, or et cetera. Okay.
In my opinion, of course.
Of course, professional opinion, of course. Okay, thank you very much. And the last thing I just want to mention to the board, to all of you, is basically, just keep this quick, I had basically done a public records request to the town manager's office and to the town clerk's office. Basically asking for the documentation of the acting town manager to what the charter says, which according to what we just heard is the charter says that it has to be an appointment on file with the town clerk's office. My records request yield back a document from the town of Uxbridge letterhead that basically states, in reference to Mr. Scott J. Freitas, who is supposedly the acting town manager, yielded that no documents ever have existed in the existence of the town manager's office as well as the town clerk's office. So that was the reason for asking my question, is basically I wanted the town, my simple question to the town was, where is the documentation that the town clerk's office should have and that the Board of Selectmen / town manager's office should have, showing that Scott J. Freitas was officially, back several years ago, at some point in time, appointed to acting town manager. And basically my records request, according to both documents signed on town letterhead, showing no documents exist in either location. So basically the town has demonstrated to me that there's no documentation that Mr. Scott J. Freitas is technically the acting town manager. So I just thought I would share this information with the board on the town's own records that I have that basically demonstrates that, that's all.
Thank you.
Yep, thank you very much, sir.
Thank you. Any other input? Howard?
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Let's see. I'm concerned about the casual indifference to the requirements of the charter. As some of you know, I am sometimes a pain in the pants because my education, my work career as an engineer and an engineering manager says to me, make it like the drawings, pay attention to the specs, and things like that. In January of this year, a special town meeting was on the Board of Selectmen's agenda for the open date of 1/28/11 for publication in the Telegram and Gazette, and a close date of February the 4th of 11. January the 28th is a Friday and not a business day, as Town Hall is closed for all but the school department. So, January 28th, day 0, because that's the date of publication. January 29th, January 30th are Saturday and Sunday. Town Hall is closed, it's not a business day. February 1, 2, 3, and 1, 2, and 3 are January 31, February 1, 2, and 3, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday. Day 4 is Thursday. Day 5 is Friday, no business day. Town Hall is closed. February 6th and 7th, 5th and 6th are Saturday and Sunday. No business. February the 7th is the 5th business day. The close date of the warrant, as noted by the agenda, is February the 4th. So it's not 5 business days. One of the things that, and this is in Article 2, Section 7, parentheses, small c, close parentheses, the last 2 sentences. I am going to quote from an email that I wrote to a couple of people. As you know, sometimes I'm a pain in the pants and I like to follow the rules. Part of that is because of my education, For much of my career, I have told people that the big picture is made up of a lot of little pictures, which are the details. In my opinion, the Board of Selectmen has improperly enacted the special town meeting inside the spring annual town meeting on May the 10th, 2011. When I met with the Charter Review Committee on April the 6th, 2011, one of the suggestions I made to them was to add to Article 2, Section 5, the last 2 sentences of Article 2, Section 7, parentheses, small c, close parentheses. They are, whenever a special town meeting is to be called, the Board of Selectmen shall give notice by publication in a local newspaper of such intention and notify all town agencies of its intention to do so. The Board of Selectmen shall include in the warrant for such special town meeting the subject matter of all petitions which are received at its office on or before the close of the 5th business day following such publication. The facts as I understand them are as follows. Board of Selectmen called a special town meeting during their regular meeting Monday, May the 11th of 2011. A notice of a special town meeting on May the 10th, 2011 at 7 p.m. to have the regular town meeting convene thereafter. Petitions will be accepted until 5 p.m. on Tuesday for the 19th. The aforementioned newspaper posting was published in the Worcester Telegram and the Gazette on April the 12th. In my view, and I go through the same timeline, which is after 3 business days, the warrant closed. The Board of Selectmen had a meeting, convened, endorsed the warrant, signed the warrant, and posted it on the 20th of April. Weekdays were counted and not business days. Some voters may have been denied the opportunity to submit petitions on or before day 5, April the 21st, as the warrant was closed on day 3, April the 19th. I am also of the opinion that the Finance Committee is an integral part of the structure of town meeting and therefore shares some of the responsibility for the integrity of the process. I tried to raise this issue on the April the 20th meeting of the Finance Committee. The chair ruled me out of order and stated his position is that the Finance Committee has been delivered a warrant for a special town meeting and the only responsibility is to hold a public hearing and report our recommendation. The charter is what it is, and some complain about it and then do nothing. It is the guidebook on how our local government generally operates. If you don't like it, then seek to change it or improve it. I, again, am concerned about casual indifference. The charter is 9 years old now, 9 or 10 years old. People don't read it. They need to pay some attention to it. If we are not going to pay attention to it, then I would suggest that, like some who say, well, let's throw it out, and what I say to them is, well, then you better be prepared to write a structure for how our government is going to work. Because if you throw the charter out, it is analogous to our general bylaws, our zoning bylaws, and it's the way generally stated as to how our government, our local government should operate. Thank you.
Thank you, Howard.
Can I ask a question?
Sure, go right ahead. Sure.
Howard, just a question, and maybe it's a question of clarification, but if you look at the definition, section 5, it talks about days, and it says the word days shall refer to business days, not including Saturdays, Sundays, and legal holidays. I'm not convinced, and maybe the charter needs to say that, whether a day that the town hall is open or not open is not a business day.
Let's see, Ken, I would suggest to you that when our state government calls for days, they in fact count Saturdays and Sundays when they talk about 35 days to call an election.
And this does too. It says when the time set is 7 days or more, every day shall be counted. So maybe it's ambiguous in here as to what a business day is, and maybe I'm not going to get into the nuts and bolts of the argument that you raised. I assume you've done the research, but from my perspective at least, if we need to change the charter to be more clear as to what the days are, then perhaps that's something that we should do.
That's part of the reason why I'm here, which is to clarify and make sure that the charter is not ambiguous relative to what goes on. But certainly with the most recent calling of the special town meeting, I would be hard to argue that Patriots' Day, which is in the middle of this, is in fact a business day, since state and local governments were closed by a fiat of
If it's a
the
legal
government.
holiday, it doesn't count as a business day according to this. But I'm not so sure that if it's a Friday, if the town hall is not open, that wouldn't count as a business day.
Yeah, and again, I would argue that if the town hall is not open, then it's not prepared to do business. Since I may not, as a citizen, gain access. There is a sign on the door which says that all other town departments are closed except for the school department, and if I remember correctly, it lists a telephone number so that someone who wants to go speak to the school department can in fact call that number and gain access to the building.
Well, now I guess I would see a clarification of what the term business day means, because I would, again, I think you can easily say that a business day, even if the town hall was not open, but it was a Friday and the rest of the community was open, that is in fact a business day. Not a business day perhaps in the town hall, but a business day with businesses being conducted at the bank and at the, the post office and every place else that people, the grocery store where people would normally go.
And citizens who may or may not have a petition may not gain access.
Right. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
No, I'm all set, thank you.
I do have some comments I want to share with the committee, but if it's all the same to you, I'd rather wait until the end. Then if you are so inclined, if it's not too late, then I'll do it then.
That's fine.
Because you have people,
I can
okay?
respect that. I'd ask, is the group okay with that?
I won't feel bad if you say, it's 9 o'clock and we all want to go.
We know it's pretty tough to hurt our feelings, so we won't do that, people. And we'll get you home in time to have that dinner that you're always talking about, so. Thanks, I appreciate that. I know George and John appreciate that. Okay, we'll turn to our, is there anyone, no one else here tonight to speak to us? Okay, good. I'd like to first of all thank George, John for coming. And I had some conversation with Ernie this afternoon, and Ernie's been kind of telling me that everything's all set, and we can't wait to get to chat with you folks, so thanks for coming. Reason we're asking both of you to be part of this process is when we looked at the charter, we looked at every individual, every group, every department head that has anything to do with following any part of the charter to come on in and chat with us. What is it that you see as working within the charter? What do you see as if you were able to design that document to be a more perfect document to assist in the implementation of doing business in the town? What would you recommend? And we're just taking input at this point. We're not here to refute anything you say. We're not here to get into dialogue as to the benefits and the downsides or upsides. It's informational sharing.
Yeah.
And we'd like to do this right up to and including the end of August, where we get input from all of the folks, and then we're going to go into deliberation and discussion, the recommendations within the group, ready for fall town meeting. So, that being said, I'd like to just refer particularly to, as we did with the school committee at our last meeting, Article 6, Section 2, for starters, which is the school committee budget. And that, I think, is the meat of the matter within the charter that speaks specifically to the school. So, if we could start with that, I would ask if, are there any members of our committee that have any specific questions that they would like to ask of George and Don? Barbara, do you want to start?
No, I think the two most important questions that we're asking everybody is what works. You know, does this structure work for you? And if not, why not? And in a perfect world, if it were just up to you, how would you write the charter as it applies to the school department? And you can have 5 or 10 minutes to think about that if you'd like.
Yeah, I'll need more than that.
How about does it work?
Yeah, well, this is the only, again, as far as me personally as a superintendent and dealing with the charter, you know, I'm just following what's in place. The only thing that I see that impacts us in trying to do it appropriately and provide the community with accurate information on a timely manner is just the presentation of our budget at a public hearing in February. It just makes no sense because we don't have the numbers, as you know, and it is a guesstimate without really knowing what cuts might be in place, what additions might be in place, what the impact of Chapter 70 is going to be, the town revenues. We just don't know those numbers. So, you know, for us, it would be more appropriate to do that in April. We're talking about the third week in April, 4th week in April, I think. Typically would be when we have some concrete numbers. So, that's mainly my concern when we look about the finance committee and the budget preparation and in line with the charter.
Typical, if you go through some of our challenges, and it's been our challenge, if you go through section 6, section D, page 16 of the charter, time submission of the proposed operating budgets, and it talks about the school committee shall submit its proposed operating budget to the town manager at least 75 days prior to the date in which the town meeting is to convene in its annual session. Right. 75 days for the school department is generally somewhere between Valentine's Day, you know, the 14th and the 21st, depending on the week or the year that it falls in. The last 7 years, I think House 1, the governor's proposed first round draft budget came out twice in 7 years by that time. So we're operating completely in the dark as far as what the revenue would be for the town, what our Chapter 70's education state aid coming into the town, and formulating that budget. The budget typically is a budget request. The definitions in here, or the terminology, one is proposed, one is its final adopted budget. Therefore, in this last several years, we will comply with the charter, more or less like semantics, to turn over a budget request to the town manager. And I know the 75 days, the town manager has 60 days to submit his final proposed budget, a recommended budget, and obviously needs the school department's budget in order to do that. In years past, there's been confusion as far as a public hearing before this draft budget goes to the town manager. And typically a public hearing is held, so the expenses involved in the meeting times for that budget request to turn over the town manager occurs, but it's not the final budget. And there's been times in the past, 6-7 years ago, before it was proposed by the school committee members, one of which that's sitting in the audience tonight, saying we were having public hearings but not reducing our budget. 3 months later, not having public hearings and reducing the budget by $1 million. And it just didn't seem correct. And it's not. The last 4 years we've been operating on what we call the revenue sharing agreement that was formulated between the Board of Selectmen and the municipal side of our government, the school committee and the school department. And it's a sharing formula of revenues coming in. So it helps alleviate the changes between House 1 and the Senate budget coming out, House Ways and Means, and all the changes and the rounds going through the budget process. But as the superintendent mentioned, every year we come to a final budget adoption somewhere at the end of April. 2 or 3 weeks before the town meeting. And that's when most of the numbers are out. We've done it last year, we did it this year. Last week is where the final budget. We went from school department or school committee meeting to final adoption of a budget directly over into the finance committee public hearing. So the finance committee, in all fairness, did not have the adopted budget. We carried it in and handed it out at the meeting. Now we are subject to more Mass General Law, I think, than any other department under Chapter 70, Chapter 71, and the rules that apply to school departments, the local public school districts, and what the school committee roles are, and the elected officials and the appointed officers are, more than any other department in town. But the only time that I think that the charter really comes up in our eyes is on an annual basis during the budget preparation process. So, you know, I think the clarification somehow, and it's not just the school department that can make those recommendations, because we're only a small piece with formulating the overall town budget, with the town manager, the finance committee, public hearings, and so on leading up to town meeting. So it's putting those pieces of the puzzle together. Interpretation from the community holding the charter saying you didn't conduct a public hearing in February for a proposed budget, or you didn't conduct a public hearing in the final adoption, or you've already voted on a final budget in February versus a final budget in April, has led to confusion across the board. But again, I mean, since FY08 and what's deemed the revenue sharing agreement, the numbers could change today. And it's a full agreement between municipal departments and the school department that if revenues, for some reason, let's keep our fingers crossed, were announced tomorrow that some form of state aid was reduced, there's a formula for that that's equally shared. So our budget's never out of balance, no matter what the revenue, local receipts or the state revenue is.
So Don, can I ask you a question? You referenced the revenue sharing agreement, of which I have a copy right here. And I guess it comes at a good time because this was incorporated in 2008, as you just referenced.
Correct.
However, this document technically, no signatures on here, it's just a kind of a handshake agreement that is well spelled out, but expires technically July of this year.
Correct.
Under the conditions of this agreement. But it does specify that they'll undergo a comprehensive evaluation by the town and school financial professionals to make any recommendations and/or changes. Perhaps it comes at a good time because the charter is going along that line, the revenue sharing agreement is falling in the same time frame, and we had a lot of questions of Ernie last week. How's this document working? He felt that it was working pretty well. And I guess the same question would apply.
Yeah.
Is it working pretty well?
Yeah, we had many meetings, Don and I did with Mike Slozik and David General, because it was coming to an end. The school committee directed us back last August to enter into those talks and see if it was working. We had some concerns because of the number of positions we lost in 2 years, that maybe it wasn't working, and after we spent multiple meetings and emails back and forth with the town finance people and working through, it was more a matter of working out some of the kinks and how it was implemented, and but overall we felt that it is a fair way to do it, so that you know, let's face it, none of us want to go. We don't want to fight the police. We don't want to fight the fire. We want to do something that's worked well to keep us from going after each other, because we're all in this together. And it's a town effort. It's not just schools against other municipalities. And so we felt it was fair and worked it out, and we are continuing with it, you know, for the coming year.
So are there any areas in here that I know the charter references nothing about the revenue sharing agreement, and perhaps it shouldn't. But
Yeah.
are there anything within this agreement that you've thought about, because July is rapidly approaching, regarding any changes that they would pertain to this document as they may be reflective of what the charter says within your budget setting process?
Yeah, I'm not sure what you're, is there
Are
any-
there any recommendations, and there are several of them here, there are 7 categories of which is descriptive of how this revenue sharing agreement works,
Mhm.
okay? And all 7 of them are pretty well spelled out.
Yeah,
Are all 7 gonna prevail,
just the same way.
or are there gonna be any deletions and/or additions, in your opinion, at this point?
There have been additions moving forward. The revenue sharing, as the superintendent mentioned, revenue sharing agreement is incorporated into the FY 2012 budget, the town manager's proposed budget, and the school committee's adopted budget. So it's balanced in both. There are additions to what we saw in FY '08 that we had to work through for 3 years that, you know, would really come to bear through using it for 3 years. And just a small example is the veterans reimbursement on an annual basis. The way the formula works when that reimbursement comes, that's just a reimbursement on expenses.
Right.
Those expenses have been rising dramatically, as you can imagine, over the last
And probably
few
will continue.
years. That reimbursement is coming back, but it's going in the general revenue pool that is split in the formula.
Right.
So moving forward, that's an addition to that item, that number comes out. Basically, the revenue sharing agreement has takes the total revenues of the town, local revenues of the town, and pays the fixed expenses that we have as a municipality, debt, service, retiree, health insurance and benefits, Blackstone Valley Regional assessment, and such, before whatever's left over is shared on a proportion between the municipal departments and the school department. The school department's budget is broken out into 2 pieces in revenue. One is that share of local tax revenue, and the Chapter 70 state aid for education that comes in. As soon as the revenue sharing agreement was implemented, that's when we started seeing major reductions in Chapter 70 state aid on an annual basis, but in accordance with the formula itself, that was to be borne by the school department, because that is education aid, direct education aid, which has happened. So there's a number of additions, small tweaks, as George mentioned, that we've incorporated into that document to move forward. As you mentioned, there's no signatures on that, but there was formal action taken by both the Board of Selectmen and the school committee to adopt that. It is a handshake agreement. There is, you know, language in that agreement that says at any point in time that somebody wants out. It's much like the charter. It's language that that we participate in voluntarily for the benefit of all and govern ourselves. But there are modifications that are coming out moving forward, and I anticipate both the Board of Selectmen and the school committee to formally adopt those changes. The school committee is quite aware of the changes.
And the assumption would be then, would it be a 3-year, as this initially was a 3-year? Would that move forward?
Yes, that's what the intent is.
Okay.
Not to make it a permanent, just,
Yes.
you know, government's so unstable that it's not something we're gonna lock into forever.
Sure.
Yeah, just as the language in the charter stands, it seems to me that we're hearing the same thing from you that we heard from the chair of the school committee, and that is that the timeline is the problem, and it just doesn't make sense, and that seems to me the big nut we've got here. So the components, if I've got them right, are first, the requirement that you hold a public hearing on a budget that you really can't present as proposed because you don't have the information.
I would say
I mean,
correct. That
70
interpretation.
February.
That interpretation that you must hold
Right, that it just doesn't make
correct.
any sense. Second, that the timeline for submission to the town manager is not realistic.
Because of so much of the revenue in the school department's budget is comprised of state aid
Right,
that we can't calculate, and we're at the mercy of the timeline that's in Boston.
okay.
It's very difficult or
And then-
challenging.
And then you've got the next component is the submission needs to be done somehow so the finance committee can review it and make a recommendation to the
Correct.
voters.
Correct.
So you've got your requirement for a public hearing, you've got submission to the town manager, and you've got to make the information available soon enough so that the finance committee can complete their requirement in terms of the timeline for town meeting.
Correct.
So it seems to me that the problem is fairly simple, and that is how can we reorganize this so that it works for everybody?
Timelines, yes.
You know, and can we, and what was the purpose of writing it this way? We said this a little bit last time we met. The environment when the charter was written in terms of the formulation of the budget was very different from it is now, than it is now. First of all, we didn't have the professional staff in place that we have now. And the finance committee did a great deal of putting the budget together. And the school department on their side and the finance committee for the rest of it, and it all had to kind of work. And as you said before, revenue sharing, it was much more difficult. We're in a different environment now. So it seems to me fairly simple that we could design something that will achieve the purpose, and that is a public hearing to let people know what's going on. A submission to the town manager in time to pull it all together, and a submission to the finance committee for their appropriate review before town meeting. Is it as simple as that?
Yes. I like to simplify things.
Okay,
it's
that's what I'm
simple.
trying to
I mean,
do.
and part, and you know, well, there's two things. Is one is, I'm sure there's some huge implications on moving the town meeting back a couple weeks. I don't know what the implications of that. Why does the town meeting have to be in the first week in May, second week in May? I don't know. Probably many ripple effects to doing that and the implications. So I'm not.
Maybe not.
Just something, but, and the other thing too is, you know, prior to revenue share agreement, the scrutiny of the school committee's budget was absolutely critical. And I'm not saying it shouldn't be scrutinized now, but we are the only town body that by statute has a committee that's responsible for that budget. So the school committee by statute, they have three responsibilities. They hire and fire me. Thankful for the hiring. I hope the firing doesn't come. They hire and fire me, they set policy, and they set the school budget. And they spend a lot of time going through that. We start in the fall over and over. So I'm not saying that the finance committee should not scrutinize it, but when there's a revenue share agreement that we have this much money, we have that much money through the revenue share. That's all we're going to spend. If we decide as a school committee, because it is a school committee decision, which I am not saying we are, to go for an override, that's a whole different story. Now we're asking for more outside of the revenue share agreement, then absolutely, you know, that should be. But, you know, so the amount of scrutiny within our budget by the finance committee and, you know, so maybe but it's just a one-night meeting
Yeah, I
anyhow.
was gonna
So
say,
it's not a lot of
let's call it the
time.
preparation of the warrant then. I mean,
Right,
you know,
right,
something
but-
that drives.
Right,
the
so it's not a
finality.
it's not a prolonged period of time. It is a one-night meeting. We tend to get those in, you know, quickly, like Don said, we had the school committee approval and then we did it. So, I see only a couple of weeks that we're off, basically, but, to give that time, but.
I think one of the problems, and Barbara was moving in that direction, and it seemed that Ernie was pretty adamant about this, as I can recall from last meeting. I quoted in the charter under Section 1, Article 6, Section 1, under public hearing, the last sentence states, "The school committee shall take its final vote on the proposed budget not sooner than at its next regularly scheduled meeting following the public hearing." And Ernie was pretty adamant about, but I want to vote on it, and we know it's there, we want to vote on it. Well, I guess from a practical point of view, he seems to make sense. But from the charter, calling for the way it's set up in the charter, it's very specific in terms of when that final vote in preparation for then the process moving forward is to take place. How do you feel about that? And it kind of falls in line with what I think you were saying, Don.
So you're talking about at the school committee's public hearing
Yeah.
to make the vote that night?
Right, so they
It makes perfect sense to me, that they could do that in the same night.
Yeah, and you're saying then not to have the language that says,
They have to
I shall
wait a
take
week.
it not sooner than it's next, so you got time to digest it at the next meeting. The way the language in the charter speaks.
Right, right. Well, I mean, you have, it's not like this is the first time the school committee sees the budget either, the public hearing.
Right.
You know, they get that information, they have time to review it, it's
Right.
discussed, period of time at that night. It does lock them in. I mean, I feel if I would leave that to the school committee to decide if they felt that they needed more time and school committee members had questions and needed more time, that they do that as a committee and say, no, we're gonna postpone the vote and do a week. But
Sure.
if they're all very comfortable and they know the numbers and they've digested them, I don't see why they can't vote that night.
Well, I think the intent there was to allow the public to weigh in their public hearing, and then give time for it to set in before we make that final decision. Again, what's happened in the past is in February, we simply don't have the time for it to meet the compliance factor of the charter and the timeline to do that. Regularly scheduled meetings, is that a regularly scheduled meeting that they set up, or is that the first and third Tuesday of each month that's posted? So that even extends it further. Again, the incorporation of the revenue sharing agreement, the town knows the school department's budget. The town manager knows the school department's target number. When we formulate our budget and create our budget, it's what we have with level service or additional needs versus the target number that we're aware of, that we have to meet, the obligation we have to meet underneath that formula. So that's always, you know, the variance factor that we're operating under and have to achieve. Again, the February dates are nothing more than checking off that we are in compliance with the charter. We know that's not our budget request, but we do not want to hold or waste anybody's time with a public hearing at this point in time, and we have no numbers from Boston to tell us what's coming into the town at this point in time. We could have, you know, we could have a 2% reduction in Chapter 70 money, which is substantial for us. It's, you know, a $200,000 reduction just on that end of it, and that's half of our budget factor.
I think all share that frustration. I really do. I think that Ernie shares it, the town manager shares it. I think everyone shares the frustration of not knowing the number. And some of it is well beyond our control. I mean, we can fix things with the charter, we can fix things with our hearing processes and that, but ultimately, how do we fix the state releasing when the final number is in place so that we can get our business done with some reliability?
Well, ultimately, it's the date of the town meeting. Everything that's here hinges off the date of the town meeting. All of your times are set, and we hold it by bylaw. And again, that date is already in bylaw. That's a whole nother process.
Right.
If you're talking about making a change to the charter, you have to consider that bylaw date change. If it's traditionally held the second week of May, and it's mentioned in the bylaw as such, we're not going to change that. It's fluid to keep it open. Maybe the combination of a bylaw modification as well as a charter modification may come into play.
Well, Mass General Law states that for a school department's budget, that the school committee must hold a public hearing, and it could be 15 minutes before the town meeting, and then take their final vote on their budget proposal for the following fiscal year. So there's no restriction on that as long as a public hearing is held before the town meeting appropriation. So, and again, the year that, for example, the year that we had a 4% reduction in local aid, the day after our town meeting a few years ago, would typically, in the past, probably required a special town meeting because our budget's out of balance and we need to get that in balance before we start operating on the new fiscal year that started on July the 1st. In that particular occasion, we knew that there's, in the school department's budget that year, after town meeting, I believe it was $174,000 that we don't have. So we started the new fiscal year on July 1st under that premise. We do not have that $174,000. We had to reduce $174,000 out of our budget, and the budget was balanced in the November town meeting. No special meeting was required because everyone knew their role and everyone knew what their budget was. It fluctuated, again, with revenue adjustments throughout the time.
In your timeline, you're looking at, if you're looking at staff reductions, you're looking at least 30-day notice before July 1st.
Correct. I mean, a minimum.
Some or more, depends on the unit.
Some or more.
Yeah, I think we're, no.
June 1st
June 1st is it, yeah. No, June 1st.
Okay.
Just a couple of thoughts here. This is not a new problem. For as long as I've been involved in town government, which is a long time, the question of getting the numbers from Boston and trying to put budgets together has been a thorny issue. So that's one thought. Another thought is, from being on the days when I was on the school committee, it doesn't make any sense to hold a public hearing when you don't have all the information and you're just putting out a budget that you know isn't the right budget. So that doesn't work. Somewhere in my memory bank, I seem to recall something in either Chapter 70 or Chapter 71 that relates to a timeline for submitting budgets. And I'm not sure whether it's regional school districts or whether it's non-regional districts. So I guess if you could maybe take a look at that and let me know whether I'm dreaming or whether or not there is in fact something, it may relate to regional districts, what the time frame is. And, should that be a guide or could that be a guide to help us here? And lastly, I would agree with George 100% because back in the days when I was chairman of the Uxbridge School Committee, we did in fact hold a public hearing and voted on it that very night. So this idea of having to wait till the next regularly scheduled meeting of the school committee does not make a lot of sense to me. I would hope that the school committee, who are listening to the people in the audience making comments upon their budget, if there was such concern that the school committee needed to take that under advisement, that they would have the sense to say, we're not going to vote on it tonight because there's things that we need to understand and fix in this budget. So I guess I wouldn't see it as, while they could vote on it that very night on the scenario that we're talking about, I think they would be foolish to do so if there was a lot of question. If there wasn't any question, then I think it perfectly would be acceptable to vote on it that night. So I, for one, would like to change that. And lastly, I think Peter's point about changing the bylaw, we've already, back in the old days, we used to have the town meeting in March. And now we've moved it to May. And I can even recall times when we've called the town meeting in May and postponed the budget section till June because the numbers weren't available then. So I think that we need something that's a little more workable and not quite as strict and confining as this seems to be. So please help us to refine what's here, that perhaps make an improvement into how we're doing business and not requiring people to jump through some hoops to meet a charter that absolutely means nothing. And just makes people go through a lot of work that's unnecessary.
Correct.
And it does.
Anybody down this end of the table, I want to make sure that I'm not excluded. Mary Pat?
I was wondering why can't the finance committee and the school committee have a joint meeting on the budget?
Well, funny you say that. Because that was my
So
suggestion
duplicative.
last year. I mean, the school, I was in a regional school district. So in a regional school district, the finance committees that I was in, finance committees from every town came to the public hearing for the school budget. And that's when it was done. So, I mean, you know, it makes more sense to me to have all the school committee members there at a public hearing with the finance committee coming to that meeting to not only address all the school committee members with questions. And I don't know, it's like I agree, it's like doing it twice. You know, we present our budget to the school committee, go through it all, then we come back, we present the finance committee, sometimes similar questions, sometimes different questions. For me, you know, I love going out at night and going to all these meetings, but for me it's one. But it's just being more efficient. In a nutshell, it's about being efficient. I don't know what purpose it serves to have a separate one. So I would be in favor of a joint meeting, and I'm not speaking for myself. I don't know Ernie's feelings on that, or
I'm not sure that needs to be changed in the charter, but I mean, as far as streamlining and trying to be more efficient.
Is the process of the town manager form of government, which is what the driving force was for this charter. That was the biggest discussion when this charter was adopted. The famous buzzwords were, how can we run a $32 million business with 5 part-time folks that don't know an awful lot about the corporation, if you will. Thus, let's get this charter in place.
Yeah.
The question is, and I know it's hard for you and it's hard for you, Don, because you didn't fill those roles pre-charter, but now here we are. You just mentioned something important, that word efficiency. And I think that's in the charter of efficiency and effectiveness of government. Is it working? Is there that level of collaboration and cooperation between the school superintendent, the town manager, the school business manager, and the local finance director? And is the charter helping that process, or is it somehow in the way? It's a tough question, I know, but I think we've got to ask tough questions to get the right solutions.
Well, want me to answer?
Yeah, please, both. I mean, both take your whack at it. I mean,
no, you know,
we're not biting.
You know, this is your town. It's not my town. I don't live here, but you know, certainly I bleed orange because I've been here 7 years and I love the town and I love everything. So, how you run your government, to me, I think either one can be effective. But if you're going to do one or the other, you need to do it. If you're going to have a town manager, let the town manager needs to be a town manager. You know, quite honestly, I don't know if that transition from the previous form to the town manager has been fully transformed. I think there's some ways we're hanging on to when people are operating under the old style. So if you're going to do it, you got to do it. I have no problems with working under a new system personally as a superintendent of schools. It makes no difference to me. But
it's technically all that the town manager has within the workings between the school superintendent and the town manager is that of the budget process. Because the charter really only speaks to the process in which I'm sure the school committee, as it relates, and when I say the school, I speak about the school committee, the superintendent, yourself, Don, all the folks within that process. So therefore, the only part that the town manager has any control over at all in working collaboratively with you guys is that of what the document says for the budget process and the submission of it to the town manager for inclusion in his budget, correct?
That's pretty fair, I think. I mean, there are other things. Obviously, with the school project going on, it's been a whole different...
Procurement officer.
It's been a whole different ballgame.
Right.
Without a school project, I would say that's probably pretty accurate.
Okay.
Well, there's a number of shared resources within the community,
Yeah.
operational. When you start to look at maintenance of buildings and things like that, I think what he's probably getting is that relationship fostered in an environment that's functional by a management on the town side and fair on your side. The maintenance of your ball fields, those kinds of things.
Oh. I think, you know, I like to think we work well with those people, and we're you know, one thing that I've that quite honestly I felt coming into this role is like, in some situations, not all, but I've tend to felt like there's a line between this is the school and this is the town municipal. And sometimes I think, and I always say, no, we're one, we're all together. School's part of the town, and sometimes I haven't felt that. And, but that's not pointed at any one person or anything like that. I think, things change, things happen, people's perception and things like that. But, my philosophy has always been, we're in this together. Whatever we can do to help the police help us, the DPW, we will do, share resources, as Pete said. That's what it should all be about.
Thus, the revenue sharing agreement is complementary to that, as you initially said.
Yeah, I think, and this is my first experience with the revenue share agreement. I think it's great because I've seen not having that, what it can do to further make a divide between the school and the other departments, and that's not healthy.
Just to add to the mix though, Harry, I hear exactly what you're saying as to whether or not the town manager, finance director elect is a help or a hindrance. But my perspective, that revenue sharing agreement would not be in place if we did not have a town manager and a finance director to work with the superintendent and the school business manager. So, I think you gotta have the people who are here working full-time, hashing out these things, trying to figure out how to make them work. I for one, don't believe that it can be done on a part-time basis with a whole bunch of elected heads sitting around the table trying to make that work.
No, I agree, and I think this has been great strides, and I think the collaboration and the cooperation that's been developed, as I watch the process becoming more fluid, I think the transparency plays itself out. Because people are going on the line, not because the document says so, but it's the right thing to do. And it's, as the charter says, it's, the town manager operates at the pleasure of the board, but ultimately it's specified for the benefit of the taxpayers who are really the stakeholders in the community, which is what I think we're all here to make better. As you just said, it's our town, it's your town too, you're a chief executive officer.
It is.
So I mean,
don't take that the wrong way.
We're all in this thing together.
We are, but the form of government you choose is up
exactly
to the citizens of Uxbridge.
Good point. Well said. Well said. Don, your comments on that?
No, I don't think there's any hindrance. We can always improve communication. We get so focused in what we're doing and our regulated duties on a daily basis that I don't think there's enough interdepartment communication. The collaboration is there in any way that we can help. The fire chief and I recently, they were short on money with the emergency generator to have it installed for the town hall. He was short. I happen to have a technology grant that would apply to that I couldn't use for anything else. So, that's the collaboration part. We received the backup services from this emergency generator like the rest of the town hall and emergency services. But that again, that's not a hindrance or a benefit of the charter, but that is professional staff working together. And Ken, you're absolutely right. That was at the time that revenue sharing agreement formulation, that was a town manager and a superintendent of schools at the time that threw the finance director and the school business manager in a room and said, don't come out till you come up with a long-term, not to get us over the hump, just to get us through next year, but we're going through some rough times ahead. Don't come out of the room until you have something that you both believe in. Not as a school department employee or a municipal employee, but that's going to work, that you can stand behind. And of course, we've taken some shots for it over the time, but it has pulled us over the troughs of this economic wave that we've had, and stabilized some of the things that were going on enough to make some decisions. I think things would be far worse had we not done that at that point in time. The revenue sharing agreement, by the way, improved our bond rating for this, that little people know, this $20 million borrowing for the construction of the new high school improved our borrowing rate and saved the taxpayers, you know, millions of dollars. Only because of that revenue sharing agreement and the bonding agencies, or because your budget is always balanced. You never have an unbalanced budget. We have other towns calling us now and asking both David Jenner and I about that formula and how to implement that formula in their own towns.
Well, kudos to you guys on that. I know that you and Dave were responsible for that.